Welcome to our podcast. Today I'm joined by Nicky Foster, and together we'll be exploring women in leadership. Nicky is a professional coach and is our coaching director at the Coaching Focus Group. Along with her coaching experience, Nicky has 20 years of corporate retail experience in a head office environment and has held a variety of commercial roles from buyer to category director, and has been involved in several leadership and women leadership programs throughout her career. After some time out with her young daughter, Nicky trained as a coach and recently joined us to support our purpose of coaching for a better tomorrow, which includes a passion for helping women in leadership roles. So Nicky, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you as our guest today.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I think it would be useful, Nicky, if we may start by outlining your journey to date, especially in the corporate world as a woman in a leadership role. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be fantastic for our listeners.
Yeah. So, as you've so adequately introduced me, I've 20 years in the retail kind of corporate head office environment. So within that, working for three major international retailers in all sorts of commercial roles from buyer to director. And I guess quite early on in my journey, I noticed perhaps what we might call today a lack of diversity and kind of lots of similar types and similar people, and often commented, in terms of the way that the recruitment often recruited other similar types. And was very lucky in one of my first roles, which actually at the time was for the Metro Group, who I was working in the UK for a company called Macro at the time, and they were part of an international group, Metro, and they were in 26 countries. And I was one of 26 representing the UK to take part in a programme for a year, which meant we went to the head office and various areas around Germany, actually, for every 6 weeks for the year. And I worked with individuals from all different countries across Europe, Bulgaria, Italy, Russia even. And at that early stage, I noticed how different everybody was in their thinking, and yet how we were all the same. And I tell that story because it really stuck with me, such a junior age in my career, this observation of different thinking. And I guess as I worked my way through my corporate career, I was quite mindful that sometimes I felt like I thought a little bit differently and wanted to do things in a different way. And I guess a big part of my own leadership journey was how I found my way to be more of my authentic self and bring that out in the work that I did. As you said in the intro, I was super lucky to take part in loads of leadership training programs and women in leadership programs, which were called Women in Business, actually, when I did them. And I was very lucky in that I had a fantastic mentor, and I had opportunity to work with a coach. And I also tried to coach and mentor others as well. So really throughout that journey was able to kind of be quite reflective about what I was learning on that journey and piecing it all together with the help of that coach and that mentor. So really exciting and interesting kind of time in that corporate environment. And then as you said, I took some time out to have my daughter. Everybody said you'll be back in 3 months, and I took a year and loved every minute of spending time with her. And then I came back and was doing quite a big category director's role. And then I was made redundant, which was a really interesting time for me, as I had to kind of reconcile the feelings of excitement and delight to be able to buy some time out to spend with my daughter, but also at the same time everything I'd worked for had kind of gone, and I had no idea what I may or may not come back to in the future. So that opened up quite a reflective period for me, in which I decided that what I loved about the work I'd always done was helping others, and particularly women, and had this kind of passion to, we used to say, pass the ladder down or whatever. I know at the time there was Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook and, talking a lot about, passing the ladder down to the next woman. And I thought, no, that's the space I'd like to work in. And actually, if I qualified to coach, then that would be a really enjoyable kind of purpose-led opportunity for me. So, qualified as a coach and found my way to work with Coaching Focus, who I loved because of the mission of coaching for a better tomorrow, and that kind of resonated with me in so many ways, on as an individual, wanting to be better tomorrow and be the better version of myself, but also, you know, as a mum and thinking about the world that I want to create for my daughter in the future, where she can aspire to have any job that she'd like to have without fear of judgment or bias, and if she chooses in the future to start a family, without the fear of the kind of repercussions of wanting to take some time out to do that. So yeah, that's kind of whistle stop tour of how I've arrived here today.
Yeah. Well, Nicky, thank you for sharing. It's a real honour for you to be part of the team here, and we're certainly enjoying working with you as much as you are with us. And I'm sure the listeners will be curious to understand, through that journey, with so much experience, both in the retail, in sort of the business world. I'm fascinated they call it women in business, an interesting term at that stage, but also across the different countries and cultures. What are those key things that you have learned and on reflection would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of observations around what I was noticing, and then there's some thoughts around the bits that I've always tried to really kind of focus on as part of my journey. So the observations around the importance of diversity and just the need for different voices and different opinions to be listened to. I've always observed this kind of need to maybe want to think about doing things differently, and the need to kind of feel like I can do that as my authentic self, and thinking about how I support and empower other people around me to do that for themselves as well. In terms of other big themes, spending a lot of time kind of thinking about clarity and really taking time out to understand who I am and how I show up. And I do have a belief that, you know, how can you expect to give your diverse and individual opinion in the world unless you first know that for yourself? So really taking time to try and connect with who I am and how I show up and what's important to me has always been really, really important. And throughout my career and since, I've always been really mindful of whether you want to call it confidence or self-belief, but I guess that, like many women I know and work with, that what is always a key theme around feeling confident and having that kind of self-belief, and some of the mind talk perhaps that comes with that, and some of the barriers or the stories that we tell ourselves. So that's always something that I've been really thoughtful about in my career, in terms of trying to get that balance right, trying to find that confidence in the right way for myself and support others around me to feel more confident as well. And then the final thought really that comes up is just about kind of connection and about people, and about, to me, a long time to really utilize and figure out how to use my network, how to get the best out of a mentor or a sponsor or an ally or whatever you want to call them, and how to use the people around me in terms of lifting each other up and having that kind of support network. So they would be the kind of things that I'd reflect on, you know, the kind of the diversity and this need for kind of finding your voice and kind of knowing who you are, and then confidence, and then that broader network and those connections and how important that can be.
Right. So if we may, I'd love to just unpick each of those three areas, because I find them fascinating. And the first point, where you talk about the diversity and being different, but wanting to be your authentic self and allowing your authentic self to be heard. So help the listeners understand how you did that and developed that authenticity as you.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to say it to make it sound like it just happened naturally and easily, because it took a lot of time to get really comfortable. I mean, I sometimes tell the story, you know, I showed up in one of the jobs I did, and I was one woman in a team of 17 men, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, how am I gonna deal with that, and how can I be myself and be my best, because you can only be at your best, right, if you're being yourself, and feel comfortable with that. And so it took a lot of, I say the word soul searching, but getting really clear about my strengths and how I show across, how I come up, and how I kind of show myself, and how I come across, and getting comfortable with that, and getting comfortable with having a different approach or a different view. And I can remember, and actually I get the feedback all the time still that, oh, what you did really worked. You've done it a different way, perhaps, than I would have done it. But I think you've probably said that to me as well. But you do have a different approach in a different way. And that kind of almost fueled the thinking and the success, really, in terms of thinking, yeah, there is more than one way. And I guess, when you kind of grow up, you start off, so, as a young girl, being, be nice, be kind, be pretty, be helpful. You go to school and it's about kind of being applied and doing well and focusing and getting your head down and fitting in. And I guess it's just trying to find the confidence to sometimes think a bit differently or have a different approach or try something new, but in the right way.
And what I'm hearing here is that one of the key roles of being authentic was really soul searching, with your words, to find those strengths and being clear on those strengths and allowing those strengths to come to the fore in an authentic way.
Yeah.
But what you're also talking about at the end of that, which talks into your second point, is having the confidence to be able to do that. And one of the words when you talked about confidence before was finding that balance, because the balance, I guess, I assume you're meaning confident but not overconfident, leading to arrogance.
Yeah.
So talk into confidence and how you found that right balance, Nicky.
Yeah, I guess it's thinking about, how when you know that you're, say, right about something, but when you feel confident about something that you're putting forward, whether it's an idea or, in my experience as a buyer, a product or something you're excited about, how you then can portray that in terms of being passionate and energetic and enthusiastic. And unfortunately, what I often see and hear is sometimes women that are confident and enthusiastic can be perceived as being pushy, and being confident can be perceived as being a bit arrogant or a bit bossy. And I guess for me growing up, and for lots of women in the in the industry, and others I'm sure the same, trying to just be really mindful of being kind of able to be confident, be assertive in the right way, without being concerned that people might say, well, she's been a bit pushy, hasn't she? You've been a bit aggressive. So that was something that created me lots of mind talk, let's say, and was a barrier that I had to overcome, and to think about how I really showed up in the right way. And it comes back to me to like, well, how can I do this and I can feel like I am my authentic self? So how is this in keeping? How is what I'm delivering or what I'm saying in keeping with, the things I know I'm great at, the values that I hold, for me, that in terms of things that are important to me, and just trying to kind of remind myself in those challenging situations that I was, I was being myself and being at my best.
Yeah. So the things I'm hearing here is knowing your strengths.
Yeah.
Knowing the values and sticking to those.
Yeah.
And having the confidence to bring those to the fore, knowing that you're authentic in that way. And you use the term right, and I'm going to use it here, but I get it, it might sound a bit arrogant, but know that you're right in that position or with that scenario, and sticking with that because you've got all of those things aligned. Yeah,
and that you reminded me in hearing you say that back to me, that idea of like trusting yourself. I talk about that so much in coaching with women, and they've got that gut feeling that, this is right, what I want to do is right, or what I want to say next is right. But somehow they stop themselves and they go and check and they get somebody else's opinion, or, it could be, do I look good in this outfit? Am I wearing it? All the way through to, £1 million deal that someone's doing. But that trying to build up that kind of personal, I don't know, it's like that gut feeling that says, I'm right about this. I'm onto a good thing. It's like, when you're sitting in a room and you want to ask that question and you think, shall I ask the question? Shall I ask the question? And then somebody else asks it and you think, oh, damn it, I shouldn't have said it, because my instinct said that was right. And I hear that so much working with women, and it's how they build up that confidence to know that they can make that observation or ask that question or give that thought, and they're right. They don't need to seek approval. And again, it comes back a little bit, doesn't it, as I've mentioned before, in terms of we are a little bit used to being told what to do and what to think, in terms of we go to school and we're kind of told what to do, and we start jobs and we're told what to do. So we seek approval, I think, culturally, certainly in the experience I've had, quite frequently. And it's just empowering individuals to say, I'm right about this, and you've got the right feeling, I've done the work, got the data, whatever it is you need, I'm gonna deliver this confidently.
So you've told our listeners your journey and
Yeah.
how you've developed. And as you quite rightly said, it's been quite a long journey and not an easy journey. You said you sort of make it sound easy, but I know, and you know, it's not been easy. With your coaching hat on,
Yeah.
how do you make it easier for women to accelerate that development or understand how to build on, build that self-confidence and that self-belief to be able to be authentic and confident and present themselves in the best way?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing which I'm super passionate about is creating spaces and opportunities for women to kind of come together and support each other and learn, or whether it's leadership programs or whatever, and knowing that in a world where we are trying to ensure everything is fully inclusive, which is absolutely as it should be, there is still a place for women to come together and have the opportunity, the space for themselves, because there are lots of studies that say having that kind of level of psychological safety as a group of women coming together, like-minded, thinking in the same way, that is a recipe for success in terms of development. So my first thought is it's okay to feel like you want to be part of a program for women. It doesn't mean that the other groups of individuals that we need to focus on to build a more diverse and inclusive workplace aren't as important. They are. I don't know as much about those as I do about women, but it's okay to want to ask that and demand that in terms of from a workplace. So that's the first thing I would say. Then again, from although in terms of coaching that would be a bit more directional, but just in terms of setting the context, I guess sometimes people show up in coaching and think, oh, everything needs to be inclusive. Is it all right for me as a woman to want to be treated a bit differently? And then from a coaching standpoint, I guess I would be working with individuals and encouraging them. Firstly, I call it do the work, in terms of getting really clear about who you are, how you show up, what you bring, what your strengths are, where your edges are, what's the work you need to do. Everything from starting with those kind of basic values, in terms of what are those core values that you hold true to yourself, that you just can't compromise on, because there's a big part of getting really clear about that, and then that, as you know, you can then figure out why you're kind of reacting to things in the way that you do, knowing those values. And I also like to think a lot about purpose and why, and particularly as we get deeper into our careers. And I think women that I'm working with are being more thoughtful and connecting more with the purpose, and whether that's what they want to give back in the workplace, in society, whether they want to work for a business that has similar values, is more sustainable, is more flexible. I think there's a real use in really connecting with, why you're getting out of bed every day and what it's all about. So kind of that, what's important to you, values, how you show up, and all that kind of stuff. And also equally your edges. And, I like to think of it on a bad day, how do people see you when you're feeling under pressure, and the bits that you'd like to work on there. So there's a bit about that. Then there is a lot of work that I do and with women around confidence, and that largely can be about kind of mind talk, or I've heard it called inner critic, or the running commentary that sometimes goes through your head when you are in more challenging situations, perhaps. And a lot of the work that I do is about being quite reflective about when that happens, and noticing the triggers and the situations, and then almost trying to reprogram that behavior to help people. I like to think of it as, quietening that voice. So just calling it out. Yeah, okay, I hear you. Not, we're not doing this now. And actually, and there's lots of research and books, as I know that you'll know, that says that you can reprogram some of that behavior if you can be quite reflective and notice when you are triggered and that mind talk occurs. You can call it out, you can capture it, and you can almost reprogram your neural pathways to start to think on a different journey. And I find that in coaching something that's a really interesting topic for many women, and something that can you really use. And there are some physical techniques that you can do to support that people find really useful.
Great. So it sounds like what you went through, you've learned how to do that yourself. You mentioned being coached and mentored through your
Yeah,
journey. So you've
yeah,
learned obviously lots from them. Now you've trained as a coach, and now you're identifying some practical tools that you can then help women to overcome some of the challenges that you faced on your journey.
yeah,
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 great.
absolutely. And I am mindful that it sounds much simpler when you can pull together all the reflections. And one of the things that really helped me when I was on my journey was a coach, because what I was on, every single training program I was given great mentors and sponsors, but I didn't really figure out what to do with it all and how to piece it all together. And that I was like responsible for it. And I remember having this like breakthrough moment with a coach. And it was a telephone coach, actually, which makes me smile when I think about it. It wasn't even video calls. It's that long ago. So, and we came up with this mantra, and it was only a few sessions, and she really helped me pull together all of the reflections I'd had from the training that I was doing, and the input from my mentor and my line manager and my sponsor. And I kind of came up with this mantra. At the time I was doing the marathon, I was doing lots of training, so I was thinking about running all the time. And I came up with this mantra, like, I run my life. And it was like really simple, but it was something that was really like the first time I had really connected with, hang on a minute, I've got all of the tools and the opportunity here, and it's about joining the dots and then turning it into something meaningful for me. And that nobody's going to kind of tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Nicky, you're going to be promoted. If I want this to happen, I need to kind of make it happen. And I need to be confident to tell people that this is what I want to happen. So that was quite a breakthrough moment for me. And I did that work with a coach. So I've always been like so curious and inspired about coaching from that early point in my career.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a great intervention from the coach. I hope you sort of get that clarity, that focus, put it all together, and then become purposeful.
Yeah.
I run my life. That's a clear purpose, right? And positive intent. And great coaching gave you the responsibility and the control about how you run your life. You've got all the resources, the tools, and all that magic that you can make it happen, and you obviously did. So that's great. But may I come on to the third thing you mentioned, which I think for me personally, even when I'm working as a coach or mentor, is what people don't really consider as part of the tool that can help them to be even more successful, which is networking.
Yeah, I think with networking, there is an element if you don't really know that you need it until you do. And my observation was that throughout my career, men were pretty good at it, and they used to invest a lot of time in it. And I used to think, why are they taking out so much time to spend time with those people? Because they're really busy and they've got a job and they don't need to see them or whatever. And I see now on reflection that I kind of missed that a little bit. And actually what they were doing was they were just maintaining relationships and, planting seeds for the future, which I was dreadful at. And actually, I really noticed that when I made a comeback from taking some time out and retraining as a coach and trying to reconnect with individuals that I felt like I had a really good relationship with, and hopefully had a really high expectation of me, and valued me when we worked together. But now it was really difficult to get people to talk to me again. And I thought, well, it's no surprise really, because I haven't really given any effort to it. So there's definitely a lot of work, I think, for individuals to think about how they maintain their network in a really authentic and genuine way, which adds value to all individuals. And then within that network, there's, the individuals that will support you on your journey, and, a mentor, a sponsor, an ally, or whatever. And I heard recently, which I quite like, the idea of if you're, in a workplace, when you're thinking about trying to achieve something, whether it's, your next role or an opportunity to be part of a project or whatever, how you should think a bit more strategically about the individuals that might be in some of those senior meetings that might be able to influence, and know whether you need to call on your sponsor or your mentor, or whatever, or your coach or whatever, to put a word in for you, and thinking a bit more strategically about how you use those individuals. Again, I think often people are given the opportunity to have a mentor or a coach, and they don't really know how to use it. So trying to really be quite thoughtful about what's going to get the best out of those conversations and that level of support.
And you call it networking. I mean, my experience of working with senior individuals is that stakeholder management is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Direct or indirect, and building that network of connections and relationships will help them be successful, and obviously in their role to succeed in their role and the organisational objectives as well. So I don't think our listeners should underestimate the value of networking and stakeholder management within that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, networking, what's the biggest reason people don't go along? Because they don't feel confident. They don't feel confident to kind of go along to, a women's event in a certain industry, knowing they know nobody and knowing that it's a networking event. And it's like, oh, how the hell do I get started with that? Just turn up. And it's kind of maybe changing the mindset a bit to say, it's all right to go along to a networking event with the intention that you are making a networking, creating new connections, and step into that and go with it a bit and enjoy it. So yeah, again, I think confidence can be a real barrier in terms of sort of putting yourself out there, and typically something women aren't very good at.
So Nicky, we've been talking about women, and coaching women. Some of our listeners will be men, and some of them will be saying, well, this is all relevant to me too.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to explore and be really sort of clear about, when we talk about women in leadership, what do we actually mean by that?
Yeah. So we're talking about supporting and empowering women in a space that lacks judgment or bias, so they can feel treated equally, they can feel like their authentic selves, and they can ultimately achieve more leadership roles, giving them the opportunity and the tools, the platform that they need, and communicated in their language, so they can be their best selves. It's really important that we support and empower women to achieve more leadership roles, because we know in businesses and in organisations and even countries, those that have more diverse leadership teams that include more women are more successful. They're more profitable. They retain staff. They have increased staff satisfaction. So, whether you're listening as a aspiring woman that wants to be a leader, or you're listening as an ally to those women in terms of empowering and supporting them, we need to get more women into those leadership roles.
Yeah. And you sort of talked into the reasons why you have this passion for women in leadership. You've been there, you've been supporting women in the coaching role, you've articulated clearly the value that it provides to organisations. Give me a flavour about other things that energise you about talking and working with women in leadership roles.
I guess the main inspiration of the work that I want to do comes from a place of being told, perhaps earlier in my journey, that I couldn't achieve it because I was a woman, and that really stuck with me in terms of so yes, we live in a world designed for men by men, but I was determined to prove that I could. And I guess the passion now comes particularly when I see other people that are told that they can't, or they shouldn't, or they won't, because they are women. And that this kind of passion to fast track or support, because I feel like so many women, nothing I'm saying about myself is different from others. And my experience growing up was there were lots of women, the women that did make it into those big jobs, it felt like they had to work really hard to get there. They had to jump through more hoops, and they had a much more challenging journey, let's say. And as a result, often many of them became much tougher to work for, and some of them had a reputation for being quite tough, but they'd worked so hard to get into those positions, and often some of their perhaps more feminine traits or whatever, they weren't able to show, so they learned to oppress some of that, perhaps, and that can be quite tiring in itself, trying to show up as someone that you're not every day. So I guess always feeling a bit inspired to try and role model in a different way. Now I'm not in one of those leadership roles, because unfortunately the world that we live in probably doesn't allow me to do it and feel like I'm doing a great job. So being able to try and support others to do it. And I like to use the expression, I heard it from somebody in Google once and I didn't catch the name, and I've searched for the quote and I haven't found it again, and it was fantastic. It was American, so I changed it slightly, but it was you take the escalator because I climbed the stairs. And I just thought that just summed up everything about the work I wanted to do. Like, I feel like I had a really hard climb up those stairs, and now I want to give someone the opportunity to step on the escalator and find their way to that elevated position further than I ever got to, so that they can then succeed and go out into the world and raise others. Yeah, that's kind of my inspiration and drive at the moment, is to, see the next generation, sound old, but give the next generation of leaders the opportunity and the support they need to step up and be part of the the change that we need for a more diverse and a more inclusive future.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about your view on those changes that we need.
Yeah.
You have a daughter. I have 2 daughters.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like many of our listeners, we want to create a world which is equitable and inclusive.
Yeah.
So what is it that some of our listeners and senior leaders that may be listening just need to think about to help change the future of organizations so it is more equitable and inclusive for everybody?
So thinking about some of the things that are important for women in terms of their share of being in a more inclusive and diverse world, taking it from that kind of lens, thinking about women and what's important. There was a really good Deloitte study last year that talked about the challenges that women face to get on, in conjunction with the fact that the senior leaders that are out there now, so women that have reached that director level, the fact that they're now leaving their jobs, and that actually for every one director that's promoted to a more senior role, 2 leave. And they're leaving because, firstly, the challenges they face, they're still having to jump through more hoops perhaps than their male counterparts. And that's things like being judged for being a parent. They are feeling more overworked and under-recognised than ever before. And actually, interestingly, well-being, which is obviously a big theme that's emerging across all industries at the moment, and diversity and inclusion are often the roles that women in leadership roles in the organisations take on. And we know they improve retention, and we know that they improve satisfaction, but also they cause more of our senior women leaders to burn out. And in fact, 43% of senior women leaders in the Deloitte study last year said they felt burnt out, versus only 31% of men. And we know that women want to work in a different culture in the future, and predominantly that's about flexibility. And actually, in that same Deloitte study, I like this one, can you tell? 97% of women said that they felt that requiring or requesting more flexibility in their role would reduce their opportunities to get on in the future. Yet 86% said that they felt that working flexibly made them more productive. So in terms of what the future looks like and what needs to change, I think there's a couple of things. There's a bit about promoting more women to manager level to increase the pipeline so that we can then get more senior leaders, because there aren't enough women actually at that manager level yet to build enough senior leaders. So that's about supporting people at a more junior level in their career to give them those tools that we've talked about, that confidence, that self-belief, the opportunity for them to get on. And then we need to think about the workplace in terms of equality, yes, flexibility, well-being, and some of the things that we know are really important to women, to want them to kind of retain those big jobs and then make a difference for other women and employees down the line.
So it sounds like there's still work in progress, sadly.
Yeah.
But the Deloitte, it sounds like the Deloitte article gave some really good insight into where we are today, and maybe some direction of where we need to go on top of those points here. And we'll make sure that's in the show notes, so listeners can follow that. One of the things I wanted to ask you, or sort of get you to articulate for our listeners, is as we come to the end of this sort of conversation, Nicky, and it's been fascinating, so thank you, is what sort of suggestions, guidance, advice would you give to women that are listening that they can take away and really make a difference in the short term, but also linking that into their overall development plans?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, find out what's available in your workplace at the moment. It's interesting because when I kind of started coaching, I reached out to lots of businesses that I knew and those that I worked with, and they told me, oh, we don't really do women in leadership programs anymore. It's all got to be fully, diversity, equality, inclusion, and we don't do programs for women. But actually, even in the last few years, I've seen a bit of a change. And I think with the rise of the term equity and people really thinking about that in a different way, perhaps over the last couple of years, there's much more traction for employers wanting to offer programs for women again. So the first thing I'd say is find out what's available to you and don't discount the value of being involved in that, because it's a fantastic opportunity. And if it's not available to you, then ask for it to be available to you, and find out what your workplace can pull together for you or support you with. And if there's no support in the workplace, then do it yourself. Get together with a group of like-minded women, share your thinking, grow together, talk about some of the challenges that you're facing. I like to say, find your tribe, but find a group of like-minded individuals that give you energy and are also there for you on the tough times, because that can add more value than you know. And finally, we've got to support each other. So we rise by lifting others, and whether we are supporting each other in terms of coaching each other, mentoring each other, celebrating each other, it's really important that women recognise the achievements and the success that other women are having and call those out. We really need to kind of support each other in this space.
There's some great advice there, and I'm sure a lot of the women listening will be inspired by that. So thank you, Nicky. It's been a real pleasure. But before I let you go, there's one question that I ask all of our guests, and you sort of talked into it at the beginning. And as you know, you articulate it right at the start. Our purpose is coaching for a better tomorrow.
Yeah.
So in your own words, what does coaching for a better tomorrow mean to you?
Yeah, so as I briefly mentioned at the beginning, yes, there is a bit about being the better version of you tomorrow, and that idea that you can always be better and have something to work on. But for me, what really resonates the most is the idea of, having more coaching conversations and a more coaching culture that allows people to think for themselves and create a world in which my daughter can strive to do any job that she wants without having to first think whether or not that's the job that girls do, and she can grow up without the bias or without the judgment, just feeling equal to her peers, knowing that she can achieve anything that she wants to achieve. So that for me inspires me in terms of the coaching for a better tomorrow and the world that we want to create.
And if we can create that, what a great tomorrow it would be. Nicky, thank you. It's been a real pleasure for your time, and thank you for sharing your story and providing some really good advice and guidance for women in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Thank you.